Welcome. You're listening to Under the Surface, a podcast where we have in-depth discussions on computer-aided techniques in drug discovery. Welcome, everybody, to Under the Surface. This is the CCG podcast. I'm your host, Chris Williams. We're here at the CCG North American UGM 2024. I'm here with my co-host, Dave Thompson.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me.
And our esteemed guest, Eric Larson.
Hello, everybody.
Who's now looking very nervous.
Exactly. Eric is terrified.
So, Eric, you're here. This is the second UGM or third UGM?
Second UGM only.
So you came last year and you came back this year?
No, 3 years ago was the last time.
What happened last year?
Last year I couldn't make it.
Okay, I guess it's all kind of a blur. But that's good. Welcome back. And now you're currently working at a biotech in Boston. And what's your job title? Just
right now I'm a director of protein science and structural biology.
Okay.
So more protein and structure determination and a little less computation. Anything I say is expressed as my own opinions and don't represent any other entity that I'm involved with. So
that's good.
A little bit of the different side of the aspect of what you guys are. I feed you what you need.
Okay,
to do your magic.
You feed the beast. Feed the beast with structure. So I mean that's kind of interesting. Like both Dave and our comp chem is coming from quantum. So I'd never heard about a structural biologist until I started in this field, really. So in some ways, modelers and structural biologists seem to be, they should have been kindred spirits.
I think they always have been, actually.
Well, maybe. And maybe that's where so I guess so I got into modeling because I just love plastic models, the stuff you do in organic chemistry and building that stuff. And I think a lot of modelers in computational chemistry say that, but you as a structural biologist, like what got you into this? What's your history? What'd you get your bachelor's in?
My bachelor's was in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology. But I started off in chemical engineering before changing into biology. And I don't know, I guess how I got into structural biology was just kind of by chance, I guess. I mean, I was always drawn to the beautiful pictures in Voet and the chemistry books and how did they do that? Where did those come from? But never really thought about becoming a structural biologist. And then when I was in graduate school, a series of misfortune, or maybe actually in retrospect, though, actually fortunate, ended up kind of meandering my way into structural biology, into the X-ray crystallography lab at Montana State University, and one thing led to another, and
never
then
look back.
That's where I've been. Yeah, that's
all right. So before we get too far into it, you are the first experimentalist we've had on the podcast. So
it's an honor. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We
Well, Vanita was also an experimentalist too.
Oh, really?
That's right. Remember, experimentalist come computational person,
Oh,
right?
she
That's right.
was.
That's right.
I'm sorry, Eric.
If Vanita's listening, we know you're an experimentalist.
I'm sorry, Vanita. I forgot that you told us that. I apologize. Sorry, Eric. Then you're the second. So no one cares.
I'm still honored. Thank you.
No one cares as much anymore. But you described going from chemical engineering. So I like it when people are like, I started doing, journalism, and then I ended up as a music major. Like, what drove you from chemical engineering to the really long title of the undergraduate degree you ended up pursuing?
I think in high school I always liked biology a lot, but I thought I wanted to be an engineer, and so when I went into engineering school, it was a lot harder than I thought. It was a tough transition to get into that, and I guess the one good thing is I still had the interest in biology, so a lot of my electives and stuff were leading towards at least a minor in biology. And so when I decided I didn't want to do engineering anymore, it was easy to just switch and continue the path in biology.
That's something I so appreciate about the North American system, is that you aren't specializing so early on. Right, I had lots of friends who did engineering as undergraduates, and then they were like, this is really hard, and I've only got 3 more years of it before I then get to choose and do something else. But in North America, it feels like you can explore, because who knows what they want to be at 16, 17. You think to yourself, I want to be a chemical engineer, and then you'd be like, it's super hard. And for me, I wanted to be outside of the lab because I'm a scaredy cat. So, you can decide not to do any more laboratory stuff. So it's great that you were able to switch.
So you were a chemical engineer. Mm-hmm. Did you do any sort of what type of chemical engineering, or you just started?
That's just the way I went. I don't know. I don't really remember why I chose chemical engineering. It sounded good, and I think chemistry was interesting in high school too, and so actually I don't even know. It just sort of happened that way.
Where was that? Was that
in
East Coast,
Colorado?
West? Colorado.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are you from Colorado originally, or?
That's where I grew up. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, and so then you end up doing the really long thing with biology at the end, and then that's so much fun that you decide you want to go to graduate school.
Yeah. Well, so I worked after I got my bachelor's degree. I worked at a environmental engineering firm.
Nice.
For a year, kind of doing sampling, a lot of sampling of soils and with biology, vegetation sample, collecting samples, sending off the samples to an analytical lab to get them analyzed, get back the results, and figure out kind of environmental impact, remediation options, those kind of things. Cool. And then decided that I wanted to go back to school, and ended up thinking that biochemistry was a lot like molecular biology, and ended up going into graduate school for biochemistry, and then learned really quickly that the chemistry is in biochemistry for a reason. You need to know a lot more chemistry than I did, so that was a bit of
a bit of a wake up,
an uphill battle for a while there. Yeah, and then eventually the structural biology came along. The first crystallographer came to Montana State University. Mm-hmm. I think my second year there, and through some failed projects and a meandering path, became really interested. I remember that. I really liked seeing those structures in chemistry classes and stuff, that those pictures of the proteins with the ribbons and all that. And now we had a professor at Montana State that was doing that stuff. And so kind of led me into his lab, where I continued and down the path of structural biology and X-ray crystallography, and haven't looked back since.
So if you're going and doing a graduate degree in structural biology, what's the goal, right? I understand it from a computational chemistry perspective. I might be using the tools, or I might be making the tools. Is it the same sort of deal? You're solving structures, or determining structures, or coming up with new ways of solving structures, or?
It was more on the biological side of things. So solving structures to help figure out biological things. Yeah. So I worked on a sulfolobus virus, a virus that came out of a Yellowstone hot spring. The genome looked nothing like anything in the databases, and so evolutionarily, structure is more highly conserved than sequence. So if we can solve the structures of these strange sequences, can we then determine a function from the structure that might not be able to be implied just from these very unusual sequences?
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I guess you're also interested in trying to solve larger biological structures, like this protein with that protein attached with that protein, like assemblies, and how those assemblies work in conjunction with each other.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you ever do any of that kind of stuff, or not really?
With complexes?
No.
Not then. It was mostly just those were all globular small proteins.
So for the system you worked on, the stuff that you got from the hot spring, you knew the sequence, but you didn't know the structure.
Right. Yep.
And no one had ever solved the structure.
No. So, and the sequences were rare. There wasn't all these giant sequence databases of every single organism and stuff back then. And so there were clues in some of the open reading frames in the viral genome. There were some clues that maybe this protein could have this kind of function or whatever, but it was gray enough area that it wasn't sure. And so, just evolutionarily, folds are more highly conserved, and functional, catalytic things that are necessary for function will be maintained, even if other parts of the sequence diverges, and that the core.
So what would you do? Would you find these new sequences, try and synthesize them, and then crystallize them and look at the structure?
Yep, that's right.
So, so here's a new organism with a bunch of genes we don't know, and we can take the genes, make the proteins, crystallize the proteins, look at them, and hopefully guess their function, or maybe find something completely new. Maybe find a fold they've never seen before, but that's more rare, right?
Yeah, and that's also, these are thermophilic organisms, and so who knows, there could be other technological
how to make heat stable soaps, like those enzymatic detergents.
Well, just for industrial processes or whatever, a thermostable enzyme that does something might be useful, and so I don't know, I don't think that ever happened with any of these proteins, but the possibility was there.
So was it pretty straightforward? Was it
nothing straightforward.
It sounded easy.
I was like, but the way you described it in such a blasé fashion, I was like, well, that took maybe 2 weeks at most.
That was a lot. Yeah, it was a long time. We started off by I had to clone all of the open reading frames. Some of them might not really be proteins. We might not have them exactly right. So clone the entire genome, individual proteins, try and express them and purify them. And then there was enough of them where you just kind of start with the ones that expressed well and then try to crystallize them. You get some crystals, get some that don't crystallize, and
yeah, so I guess at every step of the way, you're moving along with the most successful as you can.
Yeah.
You're not saying I've got to get the protein sequences for all of them. You've got some for some.
Just what works, and then you push it forward.
You can infer the protein sequences from the genome, from the DNA sequence in that. But we don't know how they're going to express or even if they're real proteins that may.
Are they actually expressed in the organism? It might just be junk DNA, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah. What about taking the organism and trying to breed it and just collect the proteins from it?
I don't know. It's a virus that infects sulfolobus, so it's kind of hard to grow these things that are in boiling. They live in boiling acid, essentially. So I think you can culture some of those organisms, but
it's just a bit challenging.
But even still, to purify proteins out of the host, it's much easier just to clone things and overexpress them in E. coli or whatever. And
what was the motivation for going after the system? Was it like a specialty of your supervisor, or was it?
No, it was a collaboration. So my supervisor was a crystallographer, but it was a collaboration with a virology lab who found they would go to the Yellowstone hot springs and try and find viruses and that. So it was a collaboration with them. They were characterizing other aspects of the virus, and then we worked together with them to try and figure out what the function of some of these unknown open reading frames may or may not be.
And was it a challenge to crystallize? I know
some of them crystallized pretty readily. Some of them didn't. There's always crystallization is kind of more magic than science when it comes down to it. And
can you expand on that a little bit? I worked with enough crystallographers over the years to be amazed at just their sheer resilience and persistence in trying stuff to get it to work. Is it really just
a lot of it's trial and error and take a small, you think something is working a little bit and try and improve it. There's a million variables, which is the one variable that makes a difference out of some variables you can't even control. You took the plate out of the incubator at just the right time, or we're listening to the right music. Metallica was playing and bounced the trays around and proteins nucleated into crystals, and you can't reproduce those kind of things. So
that's nice. So a little supplemental information says, you have to have the Unforgiven on in the background sort of thing. I like that.
Right at day 2, 36 hours later. And
I don't want to jump too much ahead because I want to keep hearing how the story went, but as much of that changed with automation?
You can do a lot more with a lot less protein now, and you can do a lot more just even visualizing things with the imagers and all kinds of stuff, and the robotics making smaller and smaller drops, and people are using echoes to do even smaller drops now for crystallization and stuff. And so
we had a number of conversations at the UGM about sort of the laboratory of the future, where it's basically robots, I guess, doing the thing, which is kind of interesting, right? There's a bunch of artificial intelligence there. Is it the same thing a little bit? Is that how it's evolved in crystallography, where you have a lot of multivariable optimization happening in an automated fashion, or is there still that magic that you can
it's a little bit of both.
little bit of both.
I still believe that there's a lot of magic to it.
Yeah, nice. That's good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump forward. So,
No, that's
was it easy to go from the protein to the crystal? So it sounded like a bunch of stuff crystallized, a bunch of stuff maybe took a bit longer. How long was it before you had a structure that you could begin to interrogate?
From cloning, from first getting the genome to having the first actual structure, I don't know how long that was actually. It was.
Are you still doing your PhD?
No, not doing my PhD anymore.
That's good.
That first structure was the best, I guess. I don't know. It was the very first thing, like grew it yourself, and then you see you're the very first person on Earth to see when you first see the electron density and know that no one else on Earth has seen that level of detail at the atomic level of something. There's just magic to seeing that the mesh of the density. I still love that every time, even if it's a structure you've seen 1,000 times with just a different compound or whatever. It's still that first glimpse of electron.
You're the explorer. I'm the first one to see this river. I'm the first one to see that mountain.
No one's ever gonna do it again. Like, I mean, Vanita already stole your thunder about being the first experimentalist, but you're the first person to, like you said, you're the first person to ever have seen the thing ever in the history of humanity. Yeah, that's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Did you let it get to your head?
No.
You did?
No, I like to share my excitement.
You did.
So,
okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good. And then
It's all a team effort down the road. The virology lab, those people that got the virus for that first structure, and what sequencing.
This sounds like government funded research. Like there was some sort of was it commercially motivated, or is it just simply to know?
That's a good question. I don't really. It was NSF funded. I know that. So government funded.
Yeah. Okay. So. Pure science. I mean, because that was a time when all the thermovents were being discovered,
Well, yeah. I mean, there could be industrial applications though for new like thermostable enzymes and stuff for various things and that. So there's a lot of potential for all kinds of things, I suppose.
So you got your first structure, you got your T-shirts printed up. I did this, you're welcome. And then you took it to the virologists, and then what did you do with it? Like how did you turn it into it? And were you able to turn it into like actionable scientific insight? Did you get to the function piece in the end?
Yeah, there was so we got. I ended up getting several structures, and a few of them like a DNA binding. One of them was clearly a DNA binding protein, and to confirm it, we were able to do some electromobility shift assays and stuff and show that, it looks like a DNA binding protein. It binds, it does bind to DNA and those kind of things. So that we did we're able to infer some function for some of these proteins. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So, and then between then and now, you finished your PhD. We're still not sure when. Then what did you do?
Then I went and did a postdoc where I always intended to go into industry. And
you did?
And so for my postdoc, I wanted to do something more medically relevant. And so then I went to a structural genomics project at the University of Washington, which was a medically driven one for pathogenic protozoa. And so I guess my PhD was kind of a small scale structural genomics project where we took a genome, cloned all of the genes, expressed as many proteins, got as many to crystallize, solved as many of those structures. So it was kind of a structural genomics approach. But then for my postdoc, I wanted to go more human relevant medical kinds of things, and so
you're motivated by money, is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, a little bit, I suppose, but also just I don't know, that's where helping with the more human side of things, the not having the grant writing and all that kind of stuff. I didn't think I wanted to go that route, and the competitiveness. And there were some people that I worked with that were trying to get professorships and that kind of stuff, and that didn't really appeal to me, I guess. So wanted to do something, get into industry, biotech, pharmaceuticals, or that path, and so I sought a postdoc that would get me the experience more on the human relevant medicinal exploration.
Like
working with the chemist, like
getting into drug discovery.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Because
small molecules.
You've like back to the virus. You've solved all these protein structures. Now what? Well, I don't know. We're trying to make up things like the thermal enzymes, make some soap. But now you want something where I'm solving the structure for a reason. And that reason is very clear, and you can explain it to yourself and everybody else, and you don't necessarily have to write a fancy grant that hopefully someone will bestow some money on you.
Yeah.
Sure.
I just heard money. I think he was solely motivated by the cash, and then he wrapped the purpose on top of it. So that's okay. I think a lot of us end up doing this because we don't want to be in academia anymore for exactly the reasons you described. It's super competitive.
That was it. Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work. So then, and you did the one postdoc.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And that was on the West Coast.
Yep, in Seattle.
And then and you said it was your PhD project essentially was a precursor to it, right? So was it the same kind of stuff again? You find the you express the sequences.
Yeah, it was a structural genomics project focused on all pathogenic protozoa. So it was mammalian mammalian parasites, I guess. So eukaryotic organisms, but they really, instead of like a lot of the early structural genomics projects, just cloned everything just to get structures and stuff. But this project really had a medical focus where they tried to identify proteins that should we be able to get structures and find things that there's a possibility that it could be medically relevant to help design drugs to help battle these
not the full
devastating
genome.
parasites.
Just the genome we could perhaps drug and knocking out that protein would actually cause death to the organism.
Yeah, so there was a real effort on trying to focus on proteins that could have medical relevance.
Yes.
Was it a bit more of a cross-functional? This is where you're starting to get into that kind of interdisciplinary
so
stuff?
that was another great aspect of it too, because there was the medical drive behind the whole thing, and so we were working with the chemistry groups. We were doing trying to identify small molecules bound to these things, where if we could get the structure, it could hopefully springboard into a real drug discovery kind of effort. Yeah.
Cool. And how long was that?
I was there for 5 years.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That seems like a lengthy postdoc.
Yes.
Was that because you were? So that either happens. Well, that happens for a variety of reasons. I imagine it was because you were successful, though.
Yeah, we did. We got a lot of structures and a few that did get some interest and had some potential with some small molecule iterations of finding something that binds, turning it into something better and showing activity. Working with some of the more biological labs that would test the compounds and that. So
I mean, that's pretty cool. That's kind of like the drug discovery cycle, except you're killing a bug instead of curing a disease, which is curing a disease is the disease and infection. You've got get the protein, make some molecule. So this is kind of a good prelude to actually working in industry.
And it's like the same thing too. We're targeting with trying to design something that hits a parasite protein that looks a lot like the human protein, but if you have the structure of both, we would compare them and try and figure out, well, just with sequence-wise, an extra pocket or whatever that's in the parasite protein, but not the human one, to try and we were thinking about specificity, I guess.
And selectivity. Yeah. So that's exactly drug discovery. And so then after the postdoc, then what?
Then I went west. I went east. Then
what? Really?
I was on the west.
Yeah,
all the way around. And then I went to Beringer Ingelheim. Was my first in Connecticut.
Connecticut, Ridgefield, was it?
In
Yeah,
Ridgefield.
because that's I think where we met.
That's where
And I
we
think-
met, yeah.
Hold on, you worked there as well, didn't you, Dave?
did.
Did you guys overlap?
I think we overlapped, but Dave was out of the group by the time I
Yeah.
had started, I think.
Yeah, I'd been forcibly removed at that point. So, when were you?
I started there in 2011.
2009. Yeah, I'd transitioned outside of research by that point. So that's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
But there was always rumors of this Dave character that used to be in the group and stuff.
Were they good rumors or was it?
Yeah, I think they.
It's like the smell you can't get rid of in a room. You're like, what's that? Oh, that's Dave.
Yeah, once you get used to it, it's like an acquired taste.
Exactly.
When it's not there, you'll miss it. But when you first smell it, it's like, what's
I don't know
this?
if they missed it. So that's good. And how long are you at BI for?
I was at BI until they closed the small molecule research in the U.S.
When was that?
That was in 2017, I believe. Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, I guess at this point, after you finished your postdoc, you're pretty much doing the thing. So then you're in industry proper. Now you're really doing the thing with tons of resources behind you.
Well, yeah, that was eye-opening too. Just the whole the resources available, the number of people doing things, and then having that was my first exposure to a real CAD group too. I mean, during my postdoc and stuff, we had some modeling people and some really good ones in that too. But this was actually a team of people doing machine learning back in those days, modeling all kinds of things with the data. And machine learning and AI and all that stuff isn't new. People have been doing it for, well, at least as long. That was my first exposure to it back then.
Yep.
And just, it was.
Yeah, because there was a comp group at BI. There was, I think there was Engo Moigi. Was that one of your, and Jorg?
Jörg Benzin.
Yeah.
Bunch of really fun, cool, talented people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a really bright group. I learned a lot from those guys. And that was I'd say that was my first exposure to kind of the computational, like real hardcore computational aspects of chemistry and structural biology.
But as a structural biologist, when you're optimizing the crystal structures, you know a little bit about force fields and things like that. So you're into that. So there must have been a little bit of overlap,
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And just building the models and stuff too. I mean, it's an iterative process, trying to improve your model all along the way to make it acceptable for computational work to follow.
Mm-hmm. So I know nothing about the refinement. I mean, I know a little bit about the refinement process, but it's pretty automated? There are tools to do this. You can give it a diffraction pattern and it'll pop out a model. And
well, there's still a lot of manual work to do, but the software and the programs have evolved a lot, and they're really, really good. It's pretty impressive how much things have changed even in the short time I've been in the field, how much better everything is getting, how much faster. I mean, I guess it's that same way for everything with the software, but even from the hardware and stuff needed to grow crystals, look at crystals, and then the X-ray technology, the detectors, everything has improved, continued to improve.
And so BI, and then unfortunately the small molecule stuff wound down in 2017, and then what happened?
Then I ended up at a small startup, a CRO that was focused on structural biology and biophysics. So it was comfortable because it was almost like we took the structural research group out of BI. It was kind of that same kind of feel, and I guess the structural research group there too. It was we were kind of working on all the projects with the different drug discovery teams and that too. So it was kind of similar in that way, where we were a group of structural biology, protein scientists.
You're kind of like a CRO in BI before. The people would just come to give you proteins, crystallize it. Here's the structure. So you're doing the same thing now.
But yeah, so it was a CRO focused on that, and so that was it was a good experience there too, learning more of the service side of things. But it was also really cool because you got a kind of a broad view of what was going on industry wide, and seeing firsthand like what some of the trends were, what a lot of people were doing, and some of the really cool things that nobody else was doing, and that stuff too. So that was
where was that? Was that in?
That was in Buffalo.
Buffalo, of all places. I don't think I've ever even. Do we have any clients in Buffalo?
Don't think so.
I don't think of Buffalo as a biotech hub.
Well,
No one thinks of Montreal as a biotech hub. I don't even know who it is, but I guess.
Well, yeah, I guess that was. There's not a lot. Not a lot of biotech and stuff in Buffalo. That's for sure.
I have fond memories of Buffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I did an academic postdoc in Hamilton, Ontario, the armpit of Canada, or the armpit of Ontario, I guess, so some people refer to it. But because I was so poor at the time, I would take the bus across the border to Buffalo, and then I would fly to Baltimore to hang out with my girlfriend at the time.
Yeah, Buffalo was a great place.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it there.
Yeah.
Had a Midwest feel to it.
Yeah, it's
a
nice
lot
place.
to do. It was it's up and coming city, and that it was a lot of fun things to do around there. It was a great place.
And how long were you there for?
That was 2 years about.
Okay, so I guess it's 2019. Almost there. Almost at the end of your PhD.
Yeah.
So
Then I finally made my way to the Boston area. Yeah.
the giant global energy minima.
Yeah, exactly. The black hole for all biotech. All roads lead to Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buffalo to Boston. That's no joke. That's a pretty significant cultural shift, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe not so much as you'd think. I don't know. I think the science in general, I think a bunch of scientists, it's a global, you meet people from all over the place in that too, no matter where you go, I think. So I think that just being in science, I think is it's just the diversity in science and stuff and that. And
that's true, but I was in Buffalo a bunch, and I remember being on the T in Boston and having a conversation with a friend of mine about the work I was doing, and this random person in the seat in front of me turned around and said, "I heard you talking about docking scoring functions. Do they actually work? Like, are these actually truly well parameterized?" Just a random person who has a seemingly reasonable question about the thing you're talking about. There's a palpable energy in the Boston area where everyone's like wicked smart and everyone's doing a thing and everyone has a thing, and like Buffalo just seems a bit more relaxed. I guess is my point.
Yeah. I guess there's a certain amount of truth to that.
Yeah, you're right. Right by Cambridge, there's just such a concentration of people, and in any bar, there's probably your competitors working over there, so you got to be hushed. Don't talk loud in a bar about any company secrets, because
that's part of the greatness of it, though. Too, you can almost find anyone on the street, and they'll have some idea about what to.
Isn't that funny? We were just over lunch. I was sat with a structural biologist. I was sat with a chemoinformatician, a computational chemist, and two medicinal chemists, and I was like, we have like a startup here. Like any random configuration.
Do we not pay you enough, Dave?
No, hey ho. Any random
probably not.
No comment. Any random configuration of people in a bar in Boston is basically a startup, right? You could just give it money and then off they go and do the thing. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's definitely a vibrant environment, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so you got there in 2019, and so you made your way to Boston, or you ended up in Boston, and you were with a company for a while.
Yeah.
Right, and that was the one before you're at now, right?
That was two before now.
Okay.
Well, he's in Boston. They don't stay in companies.
Well, yeah, that was.
It's basically one big company.
I guess that was part of the motivation to eventually come to Boston area, was dragging my kids around at inopportune times, and that was getting old. So
yeah.
All roads do lead to Boston.
Yeah, I know. I've heard that story many times, as have you. In the old days, you'd get a job at pharma. It was out on some cow pasture somewhere with the adjacent town built by them. You got a job for 20, 30 years, you're guaranteed. You live out your life there. But it changed, I think, in the early 2000s, and everyone was getting laid off, and you'd move across the country. 6 months later, layoffs, restructuring, and then people that get moved around. And even though the rents are so high in Boston, I was at AZ, and they're moving down to Cambridge, Kendall Square, just because I think the people I think they're going to attract more university students. And I think, to your point, well, if I lose my job, I just go across the street and get another one. I don't have to like cross the country or change my commute or move my family.
Yeah, that was the hardest part, is just having to move the family for all those moments when when things happen.
Yeah. Oh, that is tough.
So you're in the new gig. That's good. More of the same. As I mean, it sounds, you have quite an impressive title. So you're directing people now. So that's exciting.
Well, mostly directing CROs and stuff. So
directing is directing.
So yeah. So I don't get my hands into the crystal. I don't need to freeze my fingers in liquid nitrogen and stuff anymore, which I kind of miss that sometimes. That's some of the fun stuff that now other people do.
So you basically tell them to do the job that you would have done.
Yeah, well, yeah, in a way, I suppose. Yeah. I think a lot of the people that we work with they know what they're doing, and so it's a little bit of guidance and helping to troubleshoot. But the people that we work with are really, really good in general. And I don't know. I think that was one of the things I learned being in a CRO, is how to work with CROs now too, where they really are a part of the team, and your success is dependent on their success, and the more you can help them help you be successful, and you help them be successful, and that it works out better for everyone.
Yeah, nice. And is it still predominantly X-ray?
Yeah, predominantly we're doing X-ray. But I guess Cryo-EM's been advancing so much lately in that, and you have to keep that in mind for sure. And who knows, all the new cryo tomography and all that stuff that's coming along now, looking at full cellular scale things and stuff. I think there's a lot more excitement to come for sure.
Wow, that's wackadoodle.
Yeah, it is. Very impressive.
Yeah, Joanna's laughing at my use of the word wackadoodle. Trademark. All right, so what about all the... So, I mean, obviously we don't actually need experimentalists anymore now. I think we've solved... Haven't we solved the structure prediction problem?
Yes, AlphaFold.
AlphaFold.
Has it all.
Is this true? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a tool, just like any other tool.
Oh, that sounds very diplomatic.
I love that beautiful middle of the road.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot of things. I think it's just brought a lot of attention to structure in general, which I think is a good thing. But there's still a lot that it can't do. There's still a need for actual experimentally derived structures in the near term.
I mean, also to get perhaps new structures, like AlphaFold is built on current information in some ways too. So the more information you have to feed it, that's what I understand, right?
Sure,
this is, the more structures you have, the better it will get in a sense,
absolutely.
So, and especially crystallizing stuff from strange organisms, which you don't do anymore, but maybe back when you did.
Have you ever checked to see how AlphaFold does against your structure? I'm guessing because it's part of the public domain, it probably does quite well.
Yeah, it does pretty well. I have checked.
Yeah.
A lot of it does.
It.
I guess the structures where there's the parts in the middle of two structured domains or something where you really want to see what it looks like. AlphaFold still can't tell you that.
Yeah.
It's still.
Yeah. So that explains, because sometimes
I've
loaded some of the structures. Some are like bang on, right? But then somebody got this glob and this big long piece of spaghetti that kind of goes off into nowhere and comes
another
back.
Meatball back in the
So that's kind of where it doesn't have any information, I guess, or just randomly locates it in space.
Yeah, it does really good with the domains and stuff that it needs, but the random coiled areas, the unstructured the areas, the stuff where there isn't a lot of information yet, I think that's still where it struggles. Just like that's why a lot of times to crystallize something you have to remove those parts for a reason, and maybe.
Yeah, well, and NMR is another technique that we don't sort of talk about too much anymore, but that can capture a little bit of that dynamics, can it not? If you do NMR solutions of protein structures.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's still a fitting problem. It's still, you get an ensemble of things that you may look a lot more smeary, or you may not see it even then. Yeah.
Have you had any experience with that? Ever worked with NMR structures or?
No, not directly. No, NMR is still something I don't know much about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I was just learning
more on the small, I guess from the small molecule side, like for fragment screening and those kind of things. Then haven't done that myself. I'm not an NMR spectroscopist or that, but that's most of my experience with NMR people has been more for screening and confirming binding and those kind of things. Yeah.
Nice. So now how long have you been in your current position?
Just for a couple months now.
Just for a couple months.
Still, new company, young and exciting science. Everyone is a great team. Everyone's excited about every new piece of data that comes out and trying to work together and figure out how it all fits into the big picture.
So are you guys a CRO, or do you have some modalities you want to investigate, or is there some disease target you're interested in?
Yeah, we're oncology focused.
Okay.
But we're not a CRO. We work with CROs.
Yeah.
But
so that's interesting. You're back into actual drug discovery.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are you small molecule or large molecule?
Small
both?
molecules. Yep. Yep. And we have a computational chemist now, which has been great working closely with him, which brought me to the meeting here with you guys again, which is also great to see you guys after all the changing that I've gone through and stuff. You guys are a constant through the last how long? 14?
Yeah, 14.
13 or 14 years ago when I
the early 2000s.
First met you.
Yeah.
Guys, and no matter how much change I go through, I can always count on you guys to be the same.
Well, and we're here at our 30th anniversary. So at the talk today, when Anna had the opening statement, she's saying she knew the company right from the beginning when there was 8 people, and the 8 people that started the company, 5 are still here. I didn't even personally realize that until she pointed it out.
Yeah.
What happened to the other 3?
Oh, we don't talk about that.
I don't know. I think I shared this during. So Anna, right? Anna Lynn. She gave the opening remarks today, and she showed the training manual a few years ago. I told you I stole one, right?
Oh yes.
I told Anna. I came clean about it. I think the first year I was at CCG as a colleague of Chris's, they stuck me in essentially a utility closet. With no windows, and there were things on the side. It was at Christmas time. It was pretty miserable, and I stole myself an SVL training manual just for posterity. I figure I could hawk it on eBay when the company was gone under.
Oh man, I should have kept all my Mo manuals then. Yeah, that was when Chris and Elaine and those guys would come and visit us and give us the training sessions. We always got a nice shiny manual. I did keep them, I think, until the last move, so I moved around with them quite a bit. But
they were pretty thick though. I can understand when you after a while say this is just the tonnage is too much.
It's possible I could dig it up, so I may not have gotten rid of it.
Well, you had to schlep those places.
Oh
right?
yeah, I remember the first times I'd have to print them out in Montreal and then put a box on the plane, and then we got smart. We'd print them out at like a Bureau en Gros, or what's it called in the States?
FedEx.
Kinko's or something exactly. And then basically we show up at the site. We show up and there's some box there with some printed stuff, and we'd schlep them to the room and eventually we went onto PDFs, which I think is a lot better for the trees and a lot better for our backs.
Yep, the Lorax is
searchable. You can find things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well,
if you can find the PDB file, I guess.
Yeah.
Now
PDF. If you can
everything
find the
is
PDF
videos,
file.
Joanna.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Everything's videos.
So look, I think we've probably used up our time here. It's been a great conversation. Thank you very much, Eric.
Yes,
for joining.
Guys.
You were quite nervous to begin with. How are you feeling now? Was it just a conversation we promised it would be?
It was just a conversation. Yeah,
exactly.
I didn't know what I was being put up to here. Kind of dragged in, forced me into the chair, and
exactly. You said yes, you're committed. Go now in the hot seat.
We just want to put on record that none of the physical, cajoling that Eric is alluding to actually happened. There were no structural biologists injured in the making of this episode.
Yes, that is true. I can attest to that. Yeah.
It sounded forced, didn't it, John? It sounded like we made him say that. So
my arm is being twisted behind my head.
Again, that didn't happen.
All right, then. Well, look, we're going to go enjoy the rest of the UGM. We have a walk-in tour coming up. We got a poster session. We got lots of stuff to do. So thank you everybody for listening. Again, thanks Eric. It was a great conversation. Great to see you back again. And thanks Dave for being you.
Oh, thanks for being the odor that keeps on coming back.
Excellent. Okay, bye for now, guys. Keep studying.
All right, bye everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Under the Surface. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other platforms so you don't miss an upcoming episode. Enjoying our podcast? Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Have topics or speaker suggestions for future episodes? Send an email to podcast@chemcomp.com. That's podcast@chemcomp.com. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep loving the science. Signing off.